When you stop explaining yourself, an unexpected silence enters the room. Not a silence of absence, but a silence full of power. It's the sound of walls falling inside you, of old scripts burning quietly in the background. You used to speak fast, justify everything, soften every no with a smile. Because somewhere in the echo of childhood, you were taught that love must be earned, and explanation was your currency. You hoped that if people just understood you, they wouldn't leave. But over time, your truth became diluted, and your soul exhausted. Now, something in you refuses to play the role. You pause. You let your truth sit in silence. You stop translating it into comfort. And suddenly, people start to listen. Not because your words are louder, but because your energy has changed. This is the first taste of sovereignty. When you stop defending your existence, your presence begins to speak louder than any explanation ever could. Carl Jung called this the beginning of individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole. And it always begins in silence. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." Now think about this. When you become inaccessible, who really gets desperate? Who gets irritated? Who tries to provoke you just to elicit some emotion back? This reveals more about the other than about you. And it mainly reveals how much you are still being manipulated without realizing it. You keep giving yourself to please, to maintain peace, to not lose people who deep down were never really with you. With every forced yes, every immediate response, every emotional reaction, you give away a piece of your energy. At the end of the day, what's left? Tiredness, frustration, an emptiness you can't explain. But I'll tell you why. Because you are too available for those who don't deserve even a minute of your silence. This video is not about turning your back on the world. It's about choosing yourself. It's about learning what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, authentic, complete. And this process begins when you understand that silence can be stronger than 1,000 arguments. That withdrawal, when it comes from awareness and not from escape, is an act of power. So I ask you now, looking into your eyes, how long will you continue to be controlled by the emotions of others? How long will you react like a puppet every time someone pokes your wound? Maybe it's time to cut those strings, to withdraw, to become a mystery. Because when you stop being available, everything changes. You have been taught to always be present, to respond quickly, to please, to say yes, even when you wanted to say no. Since childhood, you have been conditioned to believe that your worth lies in how available you are to others. But here's a truth that perhaps no one has told you with this clarity. This excessive availability is not a virtue. It is a prison. As long as you continue to think that you need to be accessible all the time, emotionally or otherwise, you will be manipulated, drained, and forgotten as soon as you are no longer useful. Do you know why? Because being always available makes you seem predictable, and everything that is predictable becomes a tool. People start to use you as an emotional emergency button. They press it when they want attention, relief, validation, and then put you back on the shelf. But you don't realize this because you are trapped in an illusion that being present for everyone will make someone be present for you. But it doesn't work that way. Carl Jung spoke about the persona, this mask we wear to be accepted, loved, recognized. And it is exactly this mask that keeps you overly available. You say it's okay when you are suffocating. You respond to messages immediately, even when you are exhausted. You explain yourself, justify yourself, defend yourself, as if you owe something to the world. But the truth is, the more you place yourself at the center of others' stage, the more you disappear from your own. Being available all the time is a subtle form of self-abandonment. It is a disguised way of seeking approval, avoiding rejection, trying to control the image others have of you. But this control comes at a price, and the price is your peace. It is your vital energy being distributed as if it were infinite, when in fact, it is limited, very limited. People who want you available all the time do not actually want you. They want what you provide: validation, company, distraction, emotional comfort. But when you change, when you set a boundary, when you refuse to react, those same people get irritated. They accuse you. They say you are weird. It's not because you changed. It's because you stopped being functional for them. And here's the cruelest point. The more available you are, the less value others give you. Because what is too abundant becomes emotional rag. No one respects what they don't have to earn. No one values what is always there. So now stop and think. Who truly deserves your time? Who deserves your attention, your presence, your listening? Or better yet, who deserves your absence? But before answering that, we need to understand one essential thing. Why do we react so much? Why do we give in so easily? What is behind this almost automatic desire to respond, justify, and please? The answer lies in what Carl Jung called psychic energy. And that is what we will talk about in the next part. Because your energy is all you have. And if you don't learn to protect it, someone will use it against you. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Carl Jung did not see the human psyche as an automatic machine that reacts to stimuli without consequences. For him, our mind is like an energy system, and every thought, every emotion, every action consumes a part of that energy. The question is, are you choosing where your energy goes, or are you letting the world decide for you? Every time you react impulsively, you are wasting psychic energy. When you defend yourself against a criticism that didn't even deserve attention, when you respond to a provocation just to prove you are right, when you engage in useless discussions, when you try to please those who do not value you, you are spending your inner strength on what does not nourish you. Jung was clear. That which you resist persists. The more you react, the more you bind yourself. People who live emotionally drained are not weak. They are misdirected. And do you know what happens to someone who lives exhausted? They become vulnerable. And when you are vulnerable, you become easy prey. Manipulative, opportunistic, and emotionally needy people can sense this. They notice that you do not know how to guard your energy, that you react to everything, that you're always trying to solve the world, and they take advantage of it. Jung said that a healthy psyche is one that knows how to keep energy within the system. This means knowing how to say no without guilt, knowing how to remain silent without feeling cowardly, knowing how to observe before acting. Because true power is not in reacting, it is in choosing when and how to act. And this is only possible when you know yourself well enough to recognize your own impulses. How many times have you lost sleep over an unresolved conversation? How many times have you spent hours ruminating on what you should have said, or trying to understand why someone treated you poorly? This is energy being drained without return. You are keeping alive ghosts that should have died long ago, feeding dynamics that only exist because you insist on responding. Psychic energy is like a force field. When well guarded, it creates presence. You enter a room and command respect without saying a word. But when poorly managed, you become invisible, reactive, fragile, and the world has no mercy for those who give in easily. Therefore, start observing your own triggers. What makes you react automatically? What makes you lose your center? These are the exact points where your energy escapes. And that is where you need to work, not to become cold or indifferent, but to be selective, to be sovereign over yourself. And here comes one of Jung's greatest revelations. When you conserve your energy, you break the projections that others place upon you. And that bothers a lot. Because now, we are entering a dark territory, that of silent manipulation. Opportunistic people don't need to raise their voices, threaten, or force situations. They just trigger the buttons you've left exposed, and you react, always. Carl Jung called this projection, the psychological mechanism through which people project onto others what they cannot see in themselves. But there is another side to this phenomenon that few notice. While others project onto you, you also become the receptacle for these images. You know that friend who only reaches out when they are in crisis? That partner who always needs you to save the day? That person who praises you, but only as long as you are useful to them? None of this is by chance. They are not relating to you. They are relating to the idea of you, to the role you agree to play. And why do you agree? Because you are afraid of disappointing, afraid of not being loved, afraid of being abandoned. The most effective manipulation doesn't happen in shouting. It happens in the silence of guilt. When you feel that you owe something to the other. When you believe you need to be available, need to help, need to understand. Even when it destroys you inside. And here is the central point. The manipulator doesn't need to control you. They just need you to keep reacting the same way. But when you stop reacting, the game breaks. When you start saying no, responding with silence, withdrawing instead of explaining yourself, the projections begin to crumble. The mask they put on you falls, and this leaves people unsettled because they no longer know who you are. And worse, now they are forced to look at themselves, and not everyone is prepared for that. Your unavailability is a threat because it forces others to confront their own emptiness. The silence you offer reveals the internal noise they don't want to hear. And then comes the attack, the criticism, the emotional drama. Not because you are wrong, but because you stopped serving as a convenient mirror. Jung said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When you withdraw, when you stop feeding the cycle, then others' shadow begins to emerge. And this is unbearable for those who have always used you as an escape. But what about you? Are you ready to deal with the discomfort of being misunderstood, rejected, even attacked for protecting yourself? Are you ready to endure the silence that comes after the rupture? Because it is in this silence that your true journey begins. The journey of self-rescue, the path of individuation. You no longer react automatically. You observe. You no longer answer everything. You choose what deserves your response. You no longer try to convince. You let others stay in their own illusions, and you stay in your truth. This changes everything, because now you are no longer guided by fear, but by conscious choice. And this transforms your presence. Before, you were predictable. Now, you are mysterious. Before, you were a puppet of guilt. Now, you are a master of your energy. Before, you were emotionally exposed. Now, you are emotionally selective. And this selection is not coldness. It is maturity. It is spiritual intelligence. It is the deepest act of self-respect. When you stop being emotionally available to everyone, you begin to accumulate energy. And this energy becomes magnetism. Your presence starts to have weight. Your silence begins to speak. And some people, the right ones, begin to feel it. They don't understand exactly what it is, but they sense your center, your alignment, your peace. Carl Jung called this process integration. You are no longer a fragmented being, reactive, insecure, and dependent. You are whole, and wholeness is where rare, because it demands everything you are trying to escape from: solitude, boundaries, inner confrontation, discomfort. But in exchange, you receive something priceless: yourself. And when you become yourself, not a reflection, not a role, not a reaction, you begin to live. Not just exist, but live. And when you live, you stop performing. You stop trying to be understood. You stop exhausting yourself to prove your value. Because now, you finally understand what is real doesn't need validation. Your silence is no longer empty. It is full of presence. Your boundaries are no longer walls. They are filters. And your absence starts to speak louder than your presence ever did. People begin to notice. Some will admire you. Some will move away. Some will criticize. And that's okay, because now you no longer live for applause. You live for truth. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that privilege demands a high price, letting go of who you pretended to be just to belong. And you are finally ready to pay that price. You begin to notice how people treat you differently when you stop explaining yourself. Some get uncomfortable. Some try to provoke. Some walk away. But the real ones, they stay. Because they were never here for your performance. They were here for your presence. And presence is not loud. It is not dramatic. It does not chase. It invites. It magnetizes. It creates a space where truth can breathe. When you stop explaining yourself, your circle becomes smaller, but more sacred. You no longer attract from your wounds. You attract from your wholeness. And wholeness doesn't seek. It simply chooses. It chooses peace over chaos, stillness over noise, resonance over reaction. Carl Jung taught that wholeness is not perfection. It is the ability to hold contradiction without collapsing. And now you can, because you have become what you were always seeking: a home within yourself. Now you look back and realize you don't miss being understood. You miss being true. You don't miss constant connection. You miss peace. You don't miss being everything to everyone. You miss being yourself. And now you are, because silence became your teacher, boundaries became your guide, and presence became your power. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And now you know why. Because to accept yourself is to risk rejection, is to walk away from noise, from applause, from false belonging, is to be seen, not for your explanation, but for your essence. And few are ready for that, but you are. You stopped explaining. You started existing. And your existence, in its most authentic form, is your greatest act of freedom. So now you walk differently, not faster, not louder, but deeper. Each step is deliberate. Each breath is sacred. You've reclaimed the parts of you once abandoned for acceptance. And with them, you've built something rare. A self that no longer performs, no longer pleads, no longer pretends. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart." Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. And now you are awake. You don't explain your light to those committed to shadows. You don't translate your soul into a language meant to appease. You speak less, but your presence says more. And maybe the world doesn't always understand you, but the right ones feel you. They recognize the resonance, the integrity, the sovereignty. And you've never felt more peaceful. Not because life is quieter, but because But here's the final revelation, the one that arrives only after the silence has matured into wisdom. You never needed to be understood to be whole. That was the illusion. You thought explanation would protect you, connect you, redeem you. But what it did, for so long, was dilute you. Water you down until only the version others could digest remained. But now, that version no longer survives in your body. You've outgrown it, like an old skin that no longer breathes. Jung believed individuation was not about becoming someone new, but about unbecoming everything that isn't you. And now you know, the less you explain, the more you return. Return to the one who doesn't perform peace, but embodies it. The one who doesn't chase love, but radiates it. The one who doesn't ask for space, but lives in space. So now, you stop reaching, you stop editing, you start living, slowly, soulfully, intentionally. And the people who meet you here, they don't meet the performance, they meet the presence. And when you finally arrive at this place, this sacred silence, the grief, the solitude, the ruptures, suddenly make sense. Every goodbye you feared, every connection you outgrew, every moment you held your tongue instead of justifying your soul, it all becomes part of the initiation. Because now you see what it was preparing you for. Presence. You no longer live in reaction to the world's misunderstanding. You live in alignment with your own knowing. Jung taught that the path to wholeness demands the courage to disappoint others, not cruelly, but honestly. And now, you are honest in a way few dare to be. You disappoint others by being true. You unsettle them by being whole. You liberate them by being free. And in doing so, you give permission, not by preaching, but by existing. People sense it. They may not have the words, but they feel something when you enter the room. A groundedness, a calm, a clarity. And perhaps they don't know what changed. But you do. You stopped explaining yourself, and that single choice changed everything. So now, you walk differently, not faster, not louder, but deeper. Each step is deliberate. Each breath is sacred. You've reclaimed the parts of you once abandoned for acceptance, and with them, you've built something rare, a self that no longer performs, no longer pleads, no longer pretends. Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart." Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. And now, you are awake. You don't explain your light to those committed to shadows. You don't translate your soul into a language meant to appease. You speak less, but your presence says more. And maybe the world doesn't always understand you, but the right ones, they feel you. They recognize the resonance, the integrity, the sovereignty. And you? You've never felt more peaceful. Not because life is quieter, but because you are. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop seeking the world's permission. You start living as though your truth is already enough, because in the deepest place within you, it always was. And now, finally, you remember. If this story touched something inside you, leave a comment below that says, "I choose presence over performance." Let's see how many of us are ready to live without needing to explain ourselves anymore.